kaziwai sangano chenera mwari patiri kuexamina chidzidzo chemukati mezuva ranhasi. Is it true kuti what goes around comes around? I hope makanzwa nyaya of a young boy one day anga achitengesa zvinhu door to door, ari kutenderera in the streets paanonge ari kugadzirira kuraisa mari yake yefees anozosvika patime yekunge ava nenzara. Then he decided on the next house ndichandonoka ndobva ndakumbira chikafu chekudya. Fortunately or unfortunately or both, paakanoka a lovely young girl akabva abuda. Iye nekunyara instead yekukumbira chikafu anobva akumbira mvura yekunwa. So musikana anobva aenda, but in her mind akarealize kuti this boy anenge ane nzara, ndobva andouya neglass rizere nemukaka. So mukomana ari kunwa first sip anobva anzwa utano hwake huri kudzorereka. Ndopa anobva abvunza kumusikana kuti how much do I owe you? Then musikana anoresponda akanzi hapana chauri kufanira kubhadhara. Mama vakatidzidzisa kuti never accept a price for kindness. Then mukomana anobva ati, because of that I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Paanodzokera ari kufamba ari kuenderera mberi nebasa, now akanga ava more energetic uye akanga revived of his faith because of the food akange adya, zvokuti basa rake rakabva razoenderera mberi zvakanaka. Mukadzidza munonzwa kuti makore afamba, that young girl became critically ill, zvekuti all local doctors vakatadza kudhila nechirwere chake kusvikira azosendwa into the city uko pakashedzwa maspecialists kuti astudy her disease. So one of the doctors, Dr. Chiundura, was called in pakati pema specialists. Paakanzwa the name of the city where that young girl came from, zvinonzi a light flashed mukati memaziso ake, vakarangarira kuti that city has something to do with me, has a history with me. So immediately anobva apfeka his doctor's gown ndobva amhanya kunostada musikana uya. After a long struggle, pari kustruggle, the battle was finally won. So after battle rawinwa, Dr. Chiundura vanobva varequesta from the business office kuti vamupe the final bill for him to approve. So pavanotarisa that bill, vanobva vanyora something on in the margin of the bill risati raendeswa kumusikana. So richisvika kumusikana akatya kurivhura, she feared kurivhura nekuti ainzwisisa kuti anogona kuzotora the rest of her life kuti abhadhare the bill. But finally she looked at something in the margin paakange ari kuvhura chakakonzeresa kuti apedze kuverenga bill rese ari kuyerera nemisodzi. Masoko akange akanyorwa anobva atanga kuaverenga zvishoma nezvishoma achiyerera misodzi. Akange akanzi paid in full with 1 glass of milk. Paid in full with 1 glass of milk. Mukati mezuva ranhasi tiri kuda kudzidza, tiri kuna 2 Samuel chapter 9, tiri kudzidza pamusoro pekuti make a difference. Make a difference. Vanhu wese munotenderana neni kuti anyone who thinks that they are too small to make a difference, hawasati warara in a room munenge muine a mosquito. Now yatiri kuda kudzidza nezvayo inoda kutidzidzisa kuti we rise by lifting others up. Zvatiri kuda kudzidza nezvazvo mukati mezuva ranhasi ndezvekuti an echo responds to the call. Zvatiri kuda kudzidza nezvazvo mukati mezuva ranhasi ndezvekuti bread always fall on the battered side. So make a difference. 2 Samuel chapter 9 verse number 1 reads, zvino David wakati, kuchine mumwe wakasara weimba yaSauro wandingaitira zvakanaka nokuda kwaJonathani here. Mukadzidza mukati mebhaibheri munodzidza kuti 2 prominent kings of Israel in the Bible were Saul and David. So story ya David inotanga apo anosarudzwa naMwari. Then number 2, he was anointed by Samuel as the future king to replace King Saul. So David, after killing Goliath and winning many battles with the Philistines, Saul became very angry and suspicious of David, to the extent that he now decided to fight the now David, because he knew that David had a potential yekuva the next king. So aka decided to deal with David. So Saul spent the rest of his life trying to kill David, but David resorted to never fight back. He decided not to revenge. So later, Saul and his son Jonathan died. And by this time, as we are reading in 2 Samuel chapter 9, David was well established. Mukaverenga chapter 7, tinodzidza David achifunga mazano pamusoro pemaservices aangaita kuna Mwari. Then chapter 9 yatiri kuverenga anobva afunga of the services to humanity. Rangarira kuti David was a shepherd and Jonathan was a prince. So we have a shepherd and a prince. Jonathan grew up in the palace and was trained in the art of war. David grew up in the little town of Bethlehem and was trained to tend the sheep. So Jonathan was the oldest son in line to inherit the throne, whilst David was the youngest of 8 boys and anointed the next king in place of Jonathan. Furthermore, Jonathan was of the tribe of Benjamin, David of the tribe of Judah. Despite their differences, they were arguably the best friends the world has ever known to date. Allow me to invite you to 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse number 1, so that we appreciate better the relationship between David and Jonathan. Before then, we can understand how also can we make a difference in our lives. 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse number 1 reads, Zvino akati apedza kutaura naSauro, moyo wa Jonathan ukanamatira moyo wa David. Jonathan akamuda sezvaakanga achida moyo wake. So these two guys, their friendship began soon after David slew the giant Goliath. So Jonathan was already a great man to this young man David. Imagine Jonathan's first impression as he sees David. David, who was a young musician or someone who killed a giant. During the day, he was a warrior. Then at night, he was a songwriter. Oftenly in life, azviitiki kuti unova a hero to you who is younger than you. But this was the case for Jonathan. He emulated David, and I must respect as someone superior to him, though he was younger than him. So this zvinotijekesera the depth of their friendship. Mukaverenga munodzidza kuti they were both warriors and were men of faith. So this one, though yaiva one key similarity yavaiva nayo, they were both warriors and men of faith who served the living God. Then 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse number 3, inobva yatijekesera kuti Jonathan na David vakaita sungano, a covenant yavaifanira kuzorambira pairi nekusingaperi. Verse number 3, zvino Jonathan akaita sungano na David nokuti wakanga achimuda sezvaakanga achida moyo wake. Mukaverenga zvakare chapter 20, verse number 42, inotaura kuti Jonathan akati kuna David, enda hako nerugare, nokuti takapika tose nezita raJehovha tichiti, Jehovha uchava pakati pangu newe napakati pavana vangu navako nokusingaperi. Akasimuka akaenda na Jonathan akapinda muguta. So as we come to 1 Samuel chapter 19 now, verse number 1, remember these two made a covenant of friendship that will never be broken by anything that will happen in their lives. So because of that bond, because of that love and relationship, these guys are destined to support each other, come what may in life. Come with me now in 1 Samuel chapter 19. There is a scenario irikuitika to the other that will cause the other to intervene for the sake of saving the other. So 1 Samuel chapter 19, verse number 1 to number 6. Maybe I will read a few verses there so that we can catch up. Zvino Sauro akataura na Jonathan mwanakomana wake na varanda vake vose kuti vauraye David. So after God rejected Saul, and Saul akava more convinced that David is the one chosen by God, he plotted to kill him. And as he was plotting to kill David, Jonathan was present. So this is where the role of true friendship comes in play. Rangarira kuti Jonathan is the son to Saul. But the father now, vari kuita a conspiracy to kill the friend, Jonathan. So who is Jonathan going to support? The father or the friend? Who is he going to save in this scenario? His father or his friend? Achafamba here nekuti blood is thicker than water, or achafamba nekuti love is thicker than water, or love is thicker than blood. So 1 Samuel chapter 19 verse 1 to up to 6, tiri kuona Saul achigadzirira kuuraya David. Then what happened next? Mukaiverenga inotijekesera kuti Jonathan ended up defending and protecting David. Anotoenda kunouza David, Shamwari, my father is plotting to kill you. So I want you to move out, wondo hide, so that he will not fight you. I will communicate with you through our servants for the best safety I can ever possibly try. Why was Jonathan doing so? It was out of their friendship that caused him to preserve David as his friend. Furthermore, mukaverenga chapter 20, verse number 1 and verse number 2, inotijekesera kuti these guys, chapter 20, verse number 1. Zvino David wakatiza pa Nayoti paRama akaenda akati kuna Jonathan, ndadiko kutadza kwangu ndekweiko? Chivi changu pamberi pababa wako ndechipi zvavanotsvaga kundiuraya? Then tinobva taona Jonathan achipindura. So mukaverenga the whole chapter inotijekesera kuti kuenderera mberi kwekuda kuuraiwa kwaDavid kwakanga kuri serious. Zvekuti pavakanga vari kukurirana, David was not even safe and trusting. Akanga asina trust of anyone because he was not sure who was going to kill him. But paanotaura na Jonathan pa chapter 20, Jonathan anomuassure kuti because we made a covenant and we are going to make another covenant in this chapter, I am assuring you that I will be with you through it all. So, zvese zvichinge zvapera, David Saul atry kuuraya David zvikaramba. Eventually, Saul anobva azofa, and 3 of his 4 sons had fallen at Gilboa. One, who is the 4th one, Ishphobeth, anobva azofawo zvakare auraiwa at the later stage. So, at this time, hakusisina munhu kana kuti mukomana wekurudzi rwa Saul akanga yasara except Saul's daughters and some sons by a concubine, ndo vakange vasara. So Saul had the proud house sung. Pasina kanguwa, that proud house yaida kuuraya David yakabva yaparara yese. Yet pairi kuparara, David was consolidating his kingdom and gaining victory wherever he was going. So David ari kuraiza, yet Saul's family iri kuita sink down. I want you to remember this. Good, neither his own prosperity nor the absence of any trace of Saul's legitimate male descendant made him forget his ancient oath with Jonathan. Years had not weakened his love. His suffering at Saul's hands had strengthened his love instead. His elevation had not lifted him too high to see the old days of loneliness and the dear memory of the self-forgetting friend whose love had been an honor to the shepherd boy. So haana kukanganwa his covenant. Haana kukangana zvaakaitirwa na Jonathan, because if it was not of Jonathan, David could have been killed by Saul. So paakanga achiraisa in power, still akarangarira zvaakaitirwa kumashure. Akati, this guy saved my life. For that reason, I must do something for him. Rangarira kuti Saul, by pursuing David, he was fighting against God's plan. Hence, he was fighting God directly. What am I saying here? For if David had died, this could have put the plan of salvation at risk. Rangarirai Genesis 3:15, but she promised for the seed. Eventually, it was going to lie in Abraham's seed, and finally, it was going to lie in David's seed. The promised seed, who was the Messiah, who was going to deliver us from the jaws of the enemy. He was to come in the lineage of David. So, if David had been killed, this could have put the plan of salvation at risk. So, that's why God was obliged to intervene, could defend the plan of salvation. So Aka spent his entire life trying to chase David so that he can massacre him. But even so, Hana could win because God was with David. He wanted to achieve something through David for our benefit. That being the case, if God was planning to send the Messiah through David, if God was planning to use David to advance his plan of salvation, then Satan would use the now abandoned Saul to advance his plans. And his plan was now to kill David and throw away the plan of salvation. So if David is killed, we are without hope. That's why God had to intervene. So here, God and the devil are working through two men, who is David and Saul. One seeking to save the entire human race, while one trying to doom the entire human race. And dear friends, as you can check from this chapter, we are realizing that Israel had a king who died trying to put down the plan of salvation, while the king's son Jonathan died trying to defend the cause of the plan of salvation. Though vaibva from the same family, though akazvarwa this wicked father who was inspired by the devil himself, even so, Jonathan hana kuti regai ndifollow my ancestors. Jonathan decided instead to make a difference and support the cause for the plan of salvation. He decided to move with God regardless of his background, regardless of where he was coming from. He had to challenge his father so as to stand with God. And for that reason, David had to remember that. He has done a noble work which is worth recognizing. So with this background fresh in our mind, let's go back to our first verse. Let's go back to 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse number 1, so that we can read through the lines, connect the chords, draw the notes, and conclude. 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse number 1. Ndiyo yati, zvino David wakati, kuchine mumwe wakasara weimba yaSauro wandikaitira zvakanaka nokuda kwaJonathan here. I hope as we are now reading this verse, you understand it better than before. Let me read it again once more time. Zvino David wakati, kuchine mumwe wakasara weimba yaSauro wandingaitira zvakanaka nokuda kwaJonathan here. I remind you that it was customary during those days for the king of a new dynasty could massacre everyone who was related to the old dynasty. Anyone connected with it, aifanira kuvauraya vese. However, David goes against the principle of revenge. He decided not to revenge. He decided to make a difference. I will not go where others usually go. So he went against the principle of revenge. And here in chapter 9, we are talking of Mephibosheth. Though I know recognize uyu ndiye akasara weimba ya Sauro aiva mwana wa Jonathan. Mephibosheth, I should remind you, according to the prior dynasty of Saul, he had the right to the throne. Why? Because he was the first son. I should say he was the son of the firstborn son of the king. And other potential heirs were dead. So he was the only one remaining. So he had access to the throne. He was actually supposed to be the next king. So in a political sense, David could see Mephibosheth as a rival or a threat. But regardless of all that, he decided to invite Mephibosheth to his table. Come with me to verse number 5. Ipapo mambo David akatuma nhume kundomutora kumba kwa Makiri mwanakomana wa Amieri pa Rodebari. So Mephibosheth ari kuona vakomana vachisvika, anobva atanga kurohwa nehana pavakanga vachinoka door, because back of his mind he was seeing death. Ainzwisisa kuti death is coming. Mukaverenga 2 Samuel chapter 4 verse number 4 inotijekesera kuti when Mephibosheth was 5, when he fell from his nest and became lame in their haste to flee from David in a bid to preserve him as the potential heir of the throne, since his father Jonathan was dead. So 2 Samuel chapter 4 verse number 4 inotijekesera kaitire kakaita kuti Mephibosheth azova chirema. Vakange vari kutiza naye aine 5 years vachiti peradventure ndiye achazova the next king, because ndiye chete asara. But mukumhanya vari kutiza David, anobva adona akava chirema. Verse number 7 inobva yati, David akati kwaari, usatya, nokuti zviro kwazvo ndichakuitira zvakanaka nokuda kwaJonathan baba vako, uye ndichakudzosera nyika yose yababa vako Sauro. Iwe uchagara uchidya zvokudya patafura yangu. So akuwana an opportunity yaasina kumbowana. Now akuwana a close relationship with the king yaakanga asina before, ari kutotya kuti this king is going to kill me. Verse number 8, iye akamufugamira akati, muranda wenyu chinyiko, zvamakatarira imbwa yakafa seni. So all the years of hiding ari kwaakange ari from the king and living in fear zvakaita kuti Mephibosheth afunge sekunge is worthless. And ari kurarama kuLodibar, unoreva a place of no pasture, a place of no word, a place of no communication. He viewed himself as dead. So ari kushamisika kuti, what do you want from a dead dog like? Yet because of his father, he was worthy to come on the table. Mukaverenga verse number 13, which is our last verse for our sermonette inobva yati, naizvozvo Mephibosheth wakagara Jerusalem nokuti waigara achidya patafura yamambo, wakanga akaremara tsoka dzake dzese. So number 1, he's no longer hiding in fear of the king, and this descendant of Saul is no longer in poverty. Now he had great privileges before the king. And number 3, Mephibosheth's weakness did not vanish. His life was far better, but he was still lame. Akakwidziridzwa, akava neupenyu huri nane, but kuremara kwake kwakanga kusati kwapera, in the hands or in the presence of the Old Testament hero who was David. But what should we learn from this one is, dear friends, there is a better king who is better than David. David tried what he could, but there is a better king. And this one is the King of Kings, who is the root and the offspring of David. When he shall blow the trumpet call to his table, we shall see for the first time the crippled Mephibosheth flying for the first time. We shall see the crippled Mephibosheth walking rightly towards the table in this King of Kings. So as we conclude, what are we saying? Because Jonathan decided to make a difference, even his descendants, his children, vakawana a blessing. Rangarira kuti what goes around comes around. What you do for others, God will make sure it happens for you as well. So if you sow love, you reap love. If you sow blessings, you will reap blessings as well. And vice versa will result to vice versa. So David's grace to Mephibosheth is a wonderful picture of God's grace to us. What can we learn from Mephibosheth and David? Rangarira kuti we are also hiding, poor, weak, crippled, and fearful. But our King is always coming to us, calling us. Jesus is calling you and is calling me to his table, a better table than the tables we are having. We are separated from our King because of our wicked ancestors and our deliberate actions. We are separated. Then what happens? we also have separated ourselves from the king because we don't know him. We don't know this Jesus who decided to come down from heaven, who decided to consider heaven as nothing not worthy than dying for the human beings. He decided to come for us because of his love for us. We might not know him, but he is a greater plan. He did greater than we may ever think. This Jesus, this King who is inviting us to the table. Our King sought us out before we sought him. Before we were born, he was already setting plans to deliver us. We must receive his kindness in humility. The King returns to us what we lost in hiding from him. But we are losing a lot of blessings. But when we accept him, he's ready to bless us and to grant us the power of his Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit will give us the gift of the Spirit so that we can minister to others and show them the grace and power of this Christ. And we have the privilege of provision at the King's table. If we accept him, we will also eat at the King's table. And finally, David's grace to Mephibosheth is also a pattern for us in serving and ministering to others. Zvakaitwa na David, we also should do the same. We should seek out our enemies and seek to bless them instead. We should look for the poor, the weak, the crippled, and hidden, so as to bless them. And finally, we should bless others when they don't deserve it, and bless them more than they ever deserve. Dear friends, I'm challenging you to make a difference. Pamuno stars are the story of David, the story of Jonathan. I challenge you to make a difference. For what goes around, comes around. Today, muri kudzimba dzenyu, tsvagai kuti ndechipi chaungaita to make a difference. And if you make a difference, things will go well with you. May God add a blessing to the reading of his word.